There's parenting, and then there's the educational system, which are related, of course, but separate. The most important thing, especially, for us guys talking about this, but for, of course, moms and women as well, is we got to be the change. Like, we need to be that which we hope our kids aspire to be. That's the highest possible standard, the most humbling standard I could possibly imagine. And I fall short of that so many times, it's not even funny in a day. It's like, but being the hero of our own lives and modeling that for our kids. The word parent means to bring forth. So to be a parent is to bring forth the latent potential of our kids.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Bear.
How we doing this morning, man?
Good. Got the workout in this morning.
There it is.
Yeah, check the boxes, which I know our guest today is an expert in. So,
there we go.
So yeah.
So speaking of guests, today we have Brian Johnson with us. Brian is the founder and CEO of the Heroic Social Training Program and the author of Areté, Activate Your Heroic Potential. Heroic is a social training platform that blends ancient wisdom, modern science, and scientifically proven behavioral design tools. Their mission is to empower individuals to embody their best and most heroic versions of themselves. And this is a topic Tony and I were talking about before we went on air that we're really excited to get into. And just your background, Brian, and kind of what you've been exposed to and how you've packaged a lot of that knowledge up and made it digestible for common people to improve their lives, is kind of what we want to get into. So, Brian, without further ado, welcome to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Bear, thrilled to be here. You killed it. Areté, nice job.
Yeah, there it is.
Tony, good to see you. I'm still sweating. I just did a little target check on the workout. So nice and humid here in Austin today. So good to see you guys. Thrilled to be here.
Heck yeah,
Good
we're
to
excited
meet
on
you
this
too.
one. You got the floor, Tone.
Yeah, Brian. Well, first off, I want to compliment you on a couple of things. I think the word that comes to mind initially for me is the intentionality, even just prior to this podcast, that you, and I know it was your team probably that did some of this well, and we actually talked that the VIP box hasn't gotten here yet, but just the wrap up and summary that you and the team put together and sent to us. Like, when I first got it in my inbox, I was like, what is this? And then as I poked through, like, your willingness to give us the materials that you've put together and then also send a VIP box that has your book and a couple other things in it, was just, it's funny because when I started to do some prep then from the podcast, that word continued to stick in my mind, that this guy, like, not only in the years past of what you've done, but then what you're offering and then how you show up for everything you do is extremely intentional. So wanted to compliment you there just initially, and then would love to hear, your background is such an interesting one as a whole. I mean, for what, 25 years now, you've been kind of a blend of business and philosophy, which on the surface to some may be a head scratcher. But once again, when you see you kind of integrate those two worlds, it's a really fascinating mix, and I think there's just a ton of value add that you're delivering. So give us a little background. Where did this start for you, this interesting kind of these two different worlds, and then how did that develop over time to lead you to where you're at today?
Right on, man. I appreciate your kind words, Tony, and that's all my team. So Yana is just amazing. And it's interesting too, because even the word intentionality, I appreciate that. And what we strive to do is embody Areté. Which ancient Greek word that means excellence or virtue or being your best self. Now, of course, the VIP box has been delayed, so we didn't get it there, but the intention was there. But thank you for your kind words, and I'll share them with the team, and super grateful. It's interesting. I've done a few shows now with the book, but I've never had anyone frame it up quite the way you just did, which leads me to say something I haven't said in all these chats, which is I actually studied first generation college student. My background, well, we're middle class, blue collar family. Dad worked in a grocery store, a whole nother conversation. Went to UCLA, and I actually studied psychology and business. So majored in psychology, minored in business. So there's always been this passion to understand, what makes great people tick, and then how you can practically apply that in the world today. And I've spent half of the last 25 years as a founder CEO, raised some money, built and sold a couple of social platforms before Facebook. And when I wasn't doing that, I was reading and writing and thinking and teaching. And my life's just been kind of an integration of those two kind of facets, the philosopher and the CEO. And now, it's really integrated in what we're doing with Heroic. And talk about intentionality, dude. So I've got my Areté on one forearm, and then our public benefit corporation heroic tattooed on the left. So I'm all in. It's been a long time kind of getting to this point of clarity, and now just feel really blessed to do what I do, and appreciate the way you framed it up.
Yeah, of course. And I there's so many things I want to dive into, and I think you are another word that comes to mind is almost a bridge between two worlds that here I'm going to inject my personal bias as somebody who is in the business world, need more of a bridging, and that is kind of the I would even call it like the spiritual self-development, but then also kind of the business world, which is like a little more kind of you would call left brain based, numbers based, and your ability to kind of connect those dots and then shrink it down to the individual and focus everything on the individual is super powerful. And I think something right away that I would love to dig into with you is what I know is one of your lead mentors, Phil Stutz, which is somebody that I am aware of. I can't claim to know his work extensively, but I know that he is a huge proponent of Rudolf Steiner. So I would love, and that's somebody who's on my Mount Rushmore of people that I look up to, just with how ahead of the time he was on certain things surrounding agriculture, education. There's so many different avenues you can go down with him. But yeah, the question for me is, how did you initially get in touch with Phil, and how did he help change and kind of shift your life and potentially lead you to what you're doing now?
Yeah, again, great friend, man. Appreciate it. And yeah, so Phil Stutz, just context setting, he's kind of my spiritual father, my Yoda. We've done almost 450 one-on-one coaching sessions. Deepest influence in my life. And I'll get to how I met him, but just so people who don't know him yet, he's featured in the Netflix documentary called Stutz, with Jonah Hill, another one of his clients. And it's just, he's just a treasure, Anyway, he wrote a book called The Tools, and I read that maybe 12, 14 years ago, whenever it came out. And I loved it. And I bought the book for everybody on our team. I sent it to a bunch of friends. One of my buddies, a guy named Trip Lanier, interviewed him for his podcast called the New Man Podcast. And then I started doing interviews, a year or two later. And I'm like, hey, dude, I want to interview these guys as well. So he connected me, and I interviewed Phil Stutz and his co-author, Barry Michaels. And we hit it off. And I had just stopped working with another coach who I love, Steve Chandler. And I knew I wanted a new coach. And then I had to decide, which one am I going to work with? Phil Stutz or Barry Michaels? Phil's like the man and Barry's his protege. So the joke is, when you got a choice between Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi, you got to go with Yoda, right? I go with Yoda. And dude, I have my first page of notes with him from my first coaching session almost exactly 7 years ago, January 13th, 2017, photocopy, and it's on the corner of my desk that I can see from where I'm at right now. And I study it every morning. On that first page of notes, I get tears in my eyes, dude. Like, we could talk about the wisdom on that first page for days. And he mentioned Rudolf Steiner. So now we go to Rudolf Steiner. So Rudolf Steiner is his number one influence. And I talked about it in the book, and I can't wait for you guys to get it. But in one of the first few chapters, I try to explain Areté. It's a complex idea. Like, how do you boil it down? So I use my son, who's 10, who wants to become a chess grandmaster. He was not wanting to do something he really wanted to do. So I go on a walk with him, and I use that as the context to start teaching these things. And in one of the first chapters, I talk about Phil, who talks about Rudolf Steiner, who says there are two things that get in the way of you actualizing your potential, being your best, most heroic self, however you want to frame it. Fear and laziness. This is what I'm telling my son on a walk. Fear and laziness. You got to have the courage to show up and do what needs to get done, whether you feel like it or not, and act in the presence of fear. And you got to have the discipline to, again, close the gap between who you could be and who you're actually being. Anyway, long answer now, but Phil's he's extraordinary. The Tools, coming alive. His new book is called Lessons for a Living. But check out the Netflix documentary. Anyone watching or listening who doesn't know his work yet, he's a therapist who drops F-bombs. He's funny. He and Jonah Hill are just great together, and he's brilliant.
Yeah, and I'd love that the whole coaching dynamic is such an interesting one, because I think there can be kind of a bit of a, even personally, I feel a little bit like an eye roll at times of like, oh, you're an adult, you don't need a coach anymore. But looking at my life, and I know like that term can be interchangeable with mentors or just individuals that kind of help guide you through along your path. That you can never understate the value that a mentor or a good coach can have. So what advice would you give? Like, I mean, you just told your story of kind of meeting Phil, who became your lead mentor. For individuals who feel like they maybe are missing that in their everyday life, and they don't maybe have a strong friend group that they feel like they can lean on for mentorship, how would you go about approaching kind of finding a strong coach or mentor to help you navigate your kind of life situations?
Again, dude, love the way you're approaching it. So first and foremost, the greatest performers have the most coaches. So again, I get it. And I used to have some of this attitude, but anyone who doesn't think they need a coach doesn't have particularly high levels of ambition. Like you don't understand what you want and what it takes to get there. Again, being blunt, but you look at a Tiger Woods or look at anybody you admire who's performed at a really high level, they have coaches for every aspect of their life. And then having said that, you can also frame it up as, my big thing is the hero's journey. So Joseph Campbell's another one of my heroes and teachers. And if you look at the archetype of the hero, and all of us are the hero that we've been waiting for, you watch these heroic, movies. Why you're inspired by them is because you see yourself in all of these heroes, right? And they challenge you to show up. All right, so a hero answers the call to adventure. They leave the known world to go on their adventure. What's the first thing they get? The first thing they get is a guide. That's the heroic archetype. You need a guide. Harry Potter got Dumbledore, then he got buddies, a really important facet. He got Hermione and Ron, of course. And then the heroes go through enough cycles, and then the hero becomes the guide. So Harry Potter and Hermione, defeated evil in their virtual world because they then became the guides to the Hogwarts students. And it was together that they won the battle between vice and virtue, right? So the hero gets a guide, does the hard work, then becomes the guide. So it's a really important part of the story. We train coaches, and I'll come back to how to practically find a coach, but we train coaches. So this is such an inherently important part of our business strategy that our whole model is I train heroes who become guides, who train heroes who become guides. That's like the strategy of how we'll change the world. We've trained 10,000 people from 100 countries in our coach certification program. But then, for me in my own journey, I have really high standards. And it was hard for me to find someone that I really wanted to work with, which I think is a more valid objection that some people have is, yeah. Okay, all these people call themselves life coaches, but I'm not seeing anyone that embodies the things I really want to embody or is further along than me on certain things. That's a more fair comment, frankly. It's like, all right, well, perfect. Then I would look at it and go, okay, my number one source of coaching unquestionably has been books. So I have studied relentlessly. And the reality is a book is the distillation of some of the most brilliant thinkers in history. From, the ancients, like some of my heroes back here, I've got Epictetus, I've got Aurelius, I've got Seneca, I've got Phil, of course. I've got my favorite teachers. You can study and get coached by them via books. I used to sit down and I used to literally go to Starbucks, order a tea. I don't want to order one, but I'd pretend like I was having a conversation with somebody. So books are an incredibly powerful source of coaching in my mind. Then I think if you want to have a great coach, you need to be worthy of that great coach. So you need to do the work to show up and kind of be, frankly, interesting enough for the caliber of coach you want, and then do what they tell you to do and make them proud. It's a really big part of my relationship with Phil is, I cherish that dynamic and I have the humility to go to him. I don't submit to many people, dude, but I go to him and I'm like, all right, cool. How do I get better? And then I practice the stuff he teaches. I'm saying a lot now, but those are some of the things that arise for me intellectually and then practically that have really helped me.
Yeah, I think a couple things to unpack there. First off is like the magic of, and you may agree with this, you may not. I think you may, is that when I find, and this is once again interjecting my own personal kind of experience, that when you take care of the small things over and over and over and over again, there's a magic to the universe in which what presents to you as in a form of teacher. And that is something you can tell people 100 times, but that only resonates, and it does. Individuals that have had that experience get a little sparkle in your eye when you say that, because it it will blow your mind when you take care of all those small things. You do the right thing, which is subjective to a degree for each individual, over and over, that all of a sudden the question you're answering and the questions we ask are super important. It's wild how they will get answered in the exact timing in which they were meant to get answered. But that's something, and it relates to your work as a whole, and it's why I respect it so much. There's such a discipline that it takes to do that small thing over and over, regardless of the chaos that's going on, whether internally or externally. Stick to your kind of philosophy that you go by, and then watch the magic unfold. But I think so many people, and would love to hear your feedback on this, so many people get 10 steps on that path or 50 steps on that path, and that's they're like, they get exhausted or kind of throw their hands up and say like, oh, where's the magic? And it's like, hey, that magic happens when it may be the millionth, 1200th time. It may be the 900th. It may be the 500th if you're lucky. But that magic happens when you show up moment after moment over a prolonged time, kind of asking the right questions. You do kind of become a magnet for what I would call those mentors or those great teachers. Would you agree with that?
It's not possible for me to agree anymore. I mean, I got goosebumps more than once listening to you. I mean, this is Rudolf Steiner 101.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is Phil's channeling of that. So he calls them microtransactions. So every single thing comes down to the smallest possible moment. The big things come through the most small. I mean, even David Allen getting things done, when I interviewed him years ago, I mean, he's basically a practicing Sufi, super mystical, spiritual guy. He says the sublime comes through the mundane. So the relentless pursuit of excellence in the smallest little things is Areté. I mean, that is excellence. That is you fully expressing yourself in this moment. And then the magic is in that moment. Then you will see, quote, material magic that will show up. People will show up. The field will work to your advantage. And you can describe that in concrete terms. That doesn't need to get weird. That's just how it works. There's a neurology to people that are living in integrity with their values that neuroscientists can study. You have a charisma, moral charisma to you that people respond to when you're living in integrity. And you've got to earn your trust, dude, moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. And another one of Phil's big ideas is you never get exonerated. There's no there. So everybody wants a quick fix. They don't want to do the hard work, and then they want to be done. One of Phil's big jokes is everybody, they work hard for a day or three, and then they achieve some success, and they want to go pack their bags and go on vacation. And he's like, dude, the reward for success is harder work. Like, show up, You're never going to be exonerated from pain, uncertainty, and hard work. And when you get that, there's magic in this moment right now. I'm not doing this trying to get there per se. Of course, I have goals. But in the moment in which you express your best self, you live with Areté, you feel eudaimonia is what the ancient Greek and Roman philosophers called it. A deep sense of purposeful joy. Boom. And then all the other things happen. And it's a beautiful thing to make conscious. And then the next moment demands the same thing. So there's this beautiful coherence, to what you're saying, and 101% aligned. It's exactly, what I believe, what Phil has taught, and what Rudolf Steiner, of course, from my limited understanding of his work, communicated as well.
Well, and there's the magic too of, once again, a good or an attribute that I would regard as signifying a great mentor or coach, is that they can sit down across from the table with you and they see a version of you that has not yet manifested, meaning they and here you can go weird with it, or you can keep it grounded and just say that, like, they have the uncanny ability, and we can say we or they, depending on the position you're in that conversation, they can see a version of you that has not unfolded yet, and they are so crystal clear on that any bullshit you spew to them about why you can't or what's hindering you, it's kind of a smile. You smile at it. It's like you wink at it and say, like, no, that in which you think is hindering you to become the best version of yourself, that's the game. Like, that's actually that's the fun that we're playing. Even if we could make you that end version of yourself right now, it would mean nothing. So it's like, what, and there's where you start to develop a roadmap, and it grounds the conversation, is that you sit with somebody who sees your potential, which is a sign that they're taking care of themselves too. And then they're able to help you map that out. And then the end state isn't even the goal. It's the journey itself that's the magic behind it. But that takes an individual who has traveled those worlds and kind of that path to say, like, no, this isn't going to be easy. This is going to require a ton of discipline to get there. But they smile at that because that, to me, that's what the human spirit is here to do.
Dude, brilliant. Again, goosebumps yet again. And then, yes, so to pull that thread for a moment, one of Phil's greatest gifts to me, and I know to all of his other clients, is exactly that. So a great coach, I think Dumbledore and Harry Potter again, just use that example. Dumbledore is still a hero in that story, yet he's the guy who's gone through enough cycles. So Phil is that for me. You know, he's 25 years older than me. He's been there, done that a few more times. And Phil is believable. To use a Ray Dalio word, he's done it enough times. He has seen people's potential, brought him from very, very good to sustainably great over and over again. So when Phil says something to me, he has a believability to him, and I have goosebumps again. And frankly, he's affirmed my own ambition, but it's someone I respect and admire deeply. And then I don't need to think about it. And now it's like, oh, shoot. And then so there's that. A good coach does that. But to your point, a good coach can only do that if they have done the work on themselves and continue to do the work, which again is why it's so important for each of us to be the hero and the guide in our own stories. And then the best part about Phil is when things go wrong, he gets excited. The worse, the better, literally. It's like the core part of his philosophy is, and he talks about this in the documentary. He says, you only grow through the turds of life. So it's only through the pain, the uncertainty, and the things that go wrong that break most people that you get stronger. So literally, like we've had some significant challenges. He literally laughs and gets excited, goosebumps. It's exactly what a midwife we had, who's delivered like 10,000, 15,000, 20, I don't even know how many babies. It's insane. Our pediatrician was the same thing. Any great coach has been there and done that so many times. They laugh at the stuff that stresses everybody else out. And then to be able to make the connection that, dude, this is what you trained for. And this is the moment you actually get to prove what you're capable of. And it's going to make you stronger. It is like this. I just tattooed, my latest tattoo is anti-fragile confidence, which is an extension of Phil's idea of emotional stamina, where you go from being fragile to being not only resilient, but anti-fragile, where the biggest challenges are your greatest opportunities to grow. And again, this is what I think any great coach is going to do. And you're framing it up in a really, really powerful way. So I just want to reflect back to you. You were kind in your opening kind of, introduction, whatever, right back at you, dude. Like, this is a really, really cool, powerful connection. And I admire where you're taking this conversation and feel a real deep sense of resonance.
I got one question on the fragileness, Brian, because I do agree. I think adversity, it hardens you and it makes you more resilient to take on life's, challenges that are thrown at you, and a lot of them are unexpected. Do you feel though there are a limit? There's a point of diminishing returns, or a point where, because a lot of us go through real phases in our life where there's a real challenge. I'm in one right now, right? And some people have tragedy, they have divorces, they have crazy custody battles in court, and they're just exhausted, and 3 years go by and they've just been beaten down, and you throw your hands up. Would you say that despite those events that can occur in someone's life, in setbacks and major challenges that makes you kind of question, like, why is all this happening, that even when it's to that extent, that still hardens you up and it better prepares you for future adversity? Or do you feel there's a limit to that? And if so, where is that limit? I'm just curious your thoughts on it.
Great question. It depends. I think it depends on how you frame it up. I would offer that again, without diminishing the scope of the challenge that you're facing, that all of us have faced and will face, and the horrors that are going on in the world right now. So I don't want to pretend that there's any naivete to this, but if we're talking performance at the highest possible levels, and again, I'm not talking mediocrity and let me pat you on the head and all those things, but what's excellence really look like? What does the ideal sage, to use a Stoic idea, right? Which is an impossible standard, by the way. There was never an ideal sage, literally. So there's an asymptotic potential that will never hit. But if we're talking ideals here, then I would say that every single obstacle that you get provides you with the opportunity to deepen your practice and become better, period. No exception, full stop. And again, what's the greatest tragedy? That we're going to die? you know, that our loved ones are going to die. Well, that's a known fact that's going to happen. So let's embrace that. Then let's back up from that reality, look at our challenge we're currently facing, and frankly, bring gratitude to the fact that we're alive to face it. You know, mundane example, like this, the most ridiculous example that I'm not using as a juxtaposition to your challenges, but you know, my wife is even more into this stuff than I am, right? So we're into, you know, breathing properly, resetting our jaws. And she just drove out 90 minutes to San Antonio to get a retainer for my wife, one of my kids. We've all got these little mouthpieces, right? So she spends however much she spends time-wise and money-wise. 2 days afterwards, my daughter takes it out, cleans it in the bathtub, and drops it right down the drain, right? Literally.
Things are not cheap.
You know, whatever, it's gone. You know what I mean? Whatever, this it's just gone. And my wife's usually really good at recovering. I'm usually the one that channels my dad and gets frustrated. But I look at it, and the stoic practice is it could be worse. So I'd step out for 30 seconds just to be relaxed because it's a little bit whatever. And then I look at the bathtub and the water, and I think, well, my daughter could have drowned in that same exact bathtub water. And I'm going to get upset about a little retainer that just got lost. And again, I'm using this as a little example. But that practice of being able to radically accept reality, this is another Phil Stutz idea. You don't accept it, you radically accept it. Even Eckhart Tolle talks about act as if you scripted it. Act as if you and the heroic gods got together and you decided this is precisely what you needed right now in order to become stronger. Then the practical way that you use that obstacle to get stronger, we can talk about. Because I'm not about, oh, yeah, it sounds good. I'm about how do you do it? And there are specific things that you can do in that moment that, from my mind, absolutely guarantee that you will use it to get stronger, full stop. Now, it's hard to do, but that's kind of the frame with which I approach it. I'll pause there, knowing I already said a lot, and there's a lot more we can, and I look forward to talking about.
Well, and I'm curious, and I'm sure the viewers are, can you walk us through how to reframe your mind so when those things, arise, you do attack it from a completely different perspective? And I love that. You're almost like taking it head on. It's like, okay, this is my circumstance. I'm accepting it, and I'm reframing how I look at this challenge in my life. Because you could take, let's say, a custody case, right? You're blessed to have that beautiful child in your life, right? So maybe there's collateral damage and there's this feud, but okay, at the end of the day, you have this beautiful little child and this and that. So I like that, of looking at, the silver lining and what can you still be grateful for in that moment. But what are the practical methods that we can start to adopt to help us get through these difficult situations?
So good, dude. All right, cool. So let me step back for a moment and frame up a couple of different keywords. So the second objective in the book, the second objective in our app and in the coach training program is forge anti-fragile confidence. I'm literally preparing for a talk I'm going to give next week with some of the most elite military commanders in the U.S. military on exactly this. It's what the most elite performers want me to talk about. It's my tattoo. Forge anti-fragile confidence. 3 key words we need to define, then we'll get into the practice. First, you got to forge. Well, first, the subtitle of the book is Activate Your Heroic Potential. So activation energy is a thing. At 451 degrees, as you guys know, you can start a fire. Anything below that, you can't. So you got to get out of your cynical little attitude and activate. You got to go all in. Stay grounded, but go in. You got to activate. But 451 degrees will not forge a steel. You got to get that to 2255. It's a lot harder to forge a sword than it is to make a spork. Really, there's like a different temperature there. What do you want here? So you got to go into the forge. You got to show up like you mean it. Then anti-fragility is the opposite of fragility. I got this from Nassim Taleb. Everyone thinks about resiliency. He says that's nice, better than being fragile where you break when life hits you. But what if you actually literally got stronger? So conceptually, we got to know there's something that might be the opposite of fragile. It's anti-fragility. He says the wind, a custody battle, will extinguish a candle, but it will fuel a fire. So the question is, when you face your challenges, what are you? Are you a candle or are you a fire? Now, again, bigger the challenge, the bigger the fire has to be, or it will be snuffed out by the challenge, right? But conceptually, that's anti-fragility. But then you got to build confidence. The word confidence, confidere, means intense trust. Intense trust in what? That things are going to go perfectly? Of course not. that you have what it takes to meet any and all challenges you face. How do you build intense trust in any relationship? You do what you say you will do. Now, this leads us to how you use a challenge. I'll use a personal example. We made history raising $5 million via the SEC's crowdfunding regulations 2.5 years ago. Shoot, almost 3 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun, right? And then we spent a year and we wound up raising $11 million as part of that. We spent a year and basically, a lot of that money to launch our app with the same company that built Slack, Tinder, Uber Eats, etc. 2 days before we're going to launch, literally 2 days before we're going to launch, I'm like ready, we're fired up, whatever. I get a letter from the SEC telling me they're opening an investigation into our crowdfunding. Goosebumps, I say that. 2 days before we're going to launch. I got my Oura ring on at the time. Heart rate goes up. All right, let's go, And then what did I do? I literally said to myself, I don't remember this, but my right-hand guy who was there when I got the letter said, the first words out of my mouth were, after I read the letters, well, my whole team was in my kitchen, dude. 2 days before we're going out to the launch. I get this letter. My first words were, the heroic gods have blessed us with an opportunity to practice our philosophy. And then we got to work.
Mic drop right there. Oh man,
dude! It took us eight months to navigate a process that usually takes 24. And again, I knew we did everything at the highest possible level, morally and technically, and it is what it is. I'm not going to argue with that. First person to do something, all right, cool. Bleeding edge. There's a reason why it's called the bleeding edge. All right, cool. We're bleeding a little bit here. The firm we hired to get us through the process hired me to keynote their partner meeting to talk about how we went through it with anti-fragility. So when that happened, the old me, and again, my dad drank a lot. So he drank enough for me and 10 other people. My brother followed his footsteps. His dad did the same and killed himself. So I've never drunk. It's not my thing. But I could have decided I wanted to numb myself. And now I'm going to go off the rails and I'm going to start doing things because I don't want to attack this problem. Instead, I looked at my protocol and I doubled down on everything. Went from meditating an hour a day to 2 hours a day. I went from doing this kind of training to that kind of training. I went from making sure my sleep was solid to getting the highest Aura scores I've ever gotten the month that I got the letter. And I used this challenge to double down on my protocol. And this brings us back to Phil Stutz. He calls that emotional stamina. In one of our early chats, he said, you have a lot of emotional stamina. Perhaps the most I've ever seen, he said. To which I'm like, dude, that's awesome. I have no idea what that means. Next call, what is emotional stamina? It's the ability to handle pain, uncertainty, and hard work without breaking. And then follow-on question is, how do I get more of it? And this is it. This is the most direct answer to your question. He told me that if you want emotional stamina, what I now call anti-fragile confidence, to know you can handle whatever life throws at you and get stronger, then the worse you feel, the more committed you need to be to your protocol, which presupposes you have a protocol, which is a whole nother chat. But if when life hits you and you're able to say, life just hit me, it's time for me to make sure that I'm doubling down on my protocol, then that thing that used to break you literally becomes the thing that makes you stronger. Now, it doesn't make your problems go away immediately, but now it's, all right, if I'm approaching the custody battle, it's, all right, what do I need to do to show up the most energized, productive, connected version of myself, to model the things I want my kids to see in me through this hardship, that I want my team to see me showing up in this context. I want my attorney, I want even my ex to be able to see this is how it's done. And I'm going to use that as fuel to practice my philosophy at the highest possible levels. It's your Super Bowl, dude. Let's go. And again, I don't mean to diminish the scope of the challenge, but that's how I practically operationalize this. And again, to get me fired up, and I went from sweating after my workout to sweating going off. But let's go.
I think it's a really good takeaway because, like you kind of pointed out, there's two ways to take on adversity, right? You can take it head on, or a lot of people go down the wrong path. They start drinking, they start getting into unhealthy habits that maybe are used to fill that void or whatever that it's to mask the pain of that challenge. Or it's like, okay, hey, instead of drinking that glass of whiskey at night, go to bed at 8:30. You know what I mean? Get up earlier and meditate. And for me, that's kind of how I responded. I think I've have enough background where I've been through some hard things throughout my life that I was primed to know, all right, I need to control what I can control, and that will make me more resilient to whatever is thrown at me in this kind of current situation. So that was like, all right, I'm dialing in my nutrition. I'm going to bed earlier. I bought a sauna for my basement and put a cold tub right next to it. All right, I'm going to get into that. And all these things, it's like, all right, even though there's things outside of my control happening, if I can just control these components and be healthy, I'm better set up to take it on. And now that didn't make it any easier, but it sounds like in a way that's getting at what you're talking about is
that's it.
You know what I mean? Where, unfortunately some of my friends, have gone down the wrong path where they just start partying and they're drinking all the time and they're, chasing the ladies, and there's really no meaning to their life. And it's all just a Band-Aid for a deeper issue or something, you're going through a divorce, whatever it is. And it's like, man, that is not the approach. Like, get in the weight room, live healthy, and then like that storm will pass and you'll come out the other side. But, yeah, that's a really interesting insights from that. This is incredible.
Dude, that's it. And then another thing I talk about a lot is targeted thinking. So you get clarity on what you want, right? So the patron god of philosophy in the ancient world was an archer. So we're teleological. Telos is target. You need a target. So then and again, my thing was navigate the storm, emerge stronger, fulfill the mission. That was my mantra for the team. And I likened it to going on an Everest climb. So we're on Mount Everest, right? Right before we get to the first base camp. We make history, right? We're at base camp, brother. We make history. It's a celebration. Then we get to work. Right before we get to the first camp, a storm comes in. I was raising $15 million. Like I was $5 million in. I had commitments for the rest, and I couldn't raise it. It was like, all right, cool. Storm, comes in. Supplies get blown off. People get frozen into the mountains. So the mantra was navigate the storm, emerge stronger, fulfill the mission. But then setting that target of if I were, again, when I am in those situations, I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. I'm coming out of the best shape of my life. And then I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to create a relationship and take every single thing that didn't work in that and create something that's heroic. My daughter or my son or whatever is going to come out of this and we're going to have a close relationship than ever. But I take it up from, I'm going to keep my health too. I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. There's a level of like just ferocity that we need to bring in moments like this. It's like the ground punch is how one of my friends, Todd Herman, puts it. Those hero stories, right? Where heroes getting their butts kicked and are they going to make it through this fight? Then all of a sudden there's like this ground punch where they just enough, that level of ferocity is so important. And then you also made the point of your buddies did something else, which is why my challenge to our community is you need to be the hero that shows your community what's possible. We need you to do that. Then you become, just in your example, a guide to them, and perhaps it even becomes a really important part of your work where you're literally the guide, and obviously is in what you do. You're teaching them as a hero who's wounded, dude. And you bear your scars like medals, is how Paulo Coelho puts it. I'm not ashamed of that experience I had. I don't need to hide that. It is what it is. I'm going to show you my scars, dude. That dragon gave me this scar. That dragon gave me this scar. And there's a level of earned, calm, grounded confidence that we have what it takes to meet any challenge. And, this is how we did it. And you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. And this is why I get so fired up about it. And I appreciate you sharing your story and excited for you, and for us and for this conversation. Yeah, beautiful stuff.
Brian, something that I wrote down before we hopped on, because I think it's something you'll have great input on, and it relates to everything we're talking about. And it relates actually in a way to even like Rudolf Steiner, because he was the founder of Waldorf schools, which is something like the philosophy now with two young ones that I look at potentially finding a way to get them into those schools, just because it very much aligns with my values as a human. But the question I want to unfold to you and get your feedback on is, how are these principles, and actually let me frame it in a different way, how the regulation of your energetic state, which is a lot of which you talk about, like the way you move, the way you eat, the way you posture yourself, the way that you communicate, your family, your relationships, all of these little things are canals into what I call your energetic system. And that's not obviously my nuanced thought, but they're all contributing to the way in which your identity, for me, Tony, show up in every moment in life. How are we not educating our youth on these basic principles so that they have a foundation to build upon as they enter the world. And even the hero's journey that you talk about, and these different type of archetypes that we need to call on at times, whether it's the wounded healer or the hero or the jester, even at times, like how is this not a bigger part of how we're educating our youth? And are you optimistic that eventually, because that's kind of like if I needed to write out my life's work, a lot of it relates around finding ways to implement, which is what you're doing, is finding ways to implement these things that I think are so innate to us actualizing our potential as humans, finding a way to scale that out across communities and countries as a whole in a united way. How is this not how we're educating our youth? Because there are so many individuals like yourself that I look up to that they're doing it. And to me, it's like, it's so obvious that, like, yes, the foods you're eating, your relationships, the way you interact are what are literally building the reality in which you find yourself in. But it's a head scratcher, even having gone through university and obviously we all go through school growing up, that you don't learn any of this.
It's a remarkable thing, isn't it? I think that first and foremost, there's kind of two parts to that, right? There's parenting and then there's the educational system, which are related, of course, but separate. The most important thing, especially, for us guys talking about this, but for, of course, moms and women as well, is we got to be the change. Like, we need to be that which we hope our kids aspire to be. That's the highest possible standard, the most humbling standard I could possibly imagine. And I fall short of that so many times, it's not even funny in a day, it's like, but being the hero of our own lives and modeling that for our kids. The word parent means to bring forth. So to be a parent is to bring forth the latent potential of our kids. So for my wife and I, we homeschool. They go to nature school twice a week. My kid could make a fire before he could read at grade level. He won his division in the state. He won the state championship for chess in Texas, right? For his division before he could read at grade level. So we've taken a very iconoclastic, whatever, we're going to create our own culture with our own family, and we're going to play by our own rules, raise some little heroic iconoclasts who are able to do what we hope they will do and flourish in their lives. So I think it starts with us being that which we hope our kids will be. Then you look at the systems that exist educationally, and we'll spare the philosophical, intellectual chat about why schools were created. Dude, you only need to read so much before you're like, I'm pretty sure that's not what I want my kid to become. Yes. And then you need to work within your constraints of reality and figure out what you're going to do, whether it's Waldorf or homeschooling or some hybrid or a traditional school on your terms or whatever. Then for me, this is a big part of our mission. So, we have our heroic app and platform. We train our coaches. We've got corporate work. We've got military work. We work with sports teams and athletes and coaches in heroic education. So I created content for the prep school that Elon Musk sent his kids to in LA like 12 years ago, because I met with their headmaster. And the one thing that got him to commission me to do the work was, there's a lot of things, but the main thing was, if you know a kid's IQ and you know their discipline and you wanted to predict how well they would do in class, discipline outpredicts IQ by a factor of 2. Because you can be as smart as you want, but if you can't get yourself to do what needs to get done, good luck. Discipline predicts everything you want in life. And guess what? You can teach it. But why aren't we, to your point, why aren't we teaching energetic systems without, again, we don't need to get weird about it, but eating, moving, sleeping, breathing properly, focusing your mind? These are very, very simple, basic fundamentals that we obsess with our kids. That's what we're teaching them. How to win the ultimate game of life. And yeah, you'll do well in chess and you'll do well in these other things, but that's not the game we're playing. The game we're playing is, how do you show up powerfully in service to something bigger than yourself? But I think, again, it starts with us and then doing what we can to influence the cultural systems. But I have a lot of hope that more of us individually will come together, and then systemically we can create the structures and the systems. Because this just makes sense, dude. It's science. Like, everything we do is ancient wisdom, but modern science. This is all proven. Every single thing we've talked about, it's common sense, you know what I mean? And it also is, it's scientifically proven and validated. Now it's a question of how do we operationalize it, and then how quickly can we do it, right?
Yeah, I love the way you boil it down to the individual, because I think as you pull at any thread, you have to do that to remain sane. Because if not, you will. And it's those discussions are worth taking place as far as when you zoom out on a species or a community or a country as a whole, those are valid conversations, but you'll kind of spin in circles as to trying to figure out the way to address that. Whereas when you address the individual, then realize the exponential potential when you influence individuals for them to influence individuals, and then how that scales. I think that is like the grounded approach to really making change, as opposed to like looking to our leaders or looking to politicians to do it. It's like, that's not going to work. And it almost is a way to deflect the responsibility off of yourself, instead of doing what you said and kind of taking that on. But yeah, it is. It's like we're like a species with amnesia at times, though, when you do look at like all the ancient wisdom to exist. Like there is a slight frustration for me at times that like we aren't integrating things quicker. But once again, that's my own projection. And I think the more we base it off an individual level and make our bed, it does have ripple effects that can start to make a change throughout society.
Yeah, brilliant, dude.
I'm curious on the, from the Areté, Activate Your Heroic Potential, the 7 objectives. That's one of the questions we had down, and just kind of walking through them. And honestly, I think quickly for the viewers, because Tony and I know your background, but I think it's also important to maybe if you could walk us through how you landed on all this stuff, because, the viewer might like, I don't know who this guy, you know what I mean? But it's like your background is so incredible and so interesting. Can you frame that up prior to getting into, the 7 objectives? And that way that it provides some context for the viewers and listeners of where all this kind of was, kind of came from, and how you consolidated all these, honestly, really epic thoughts into, something that's very digestible for the common man.
Yeah, again, I appreciate it. And the quick story, half of the last, I'm turned 50 in 3 months. Time flies when you're having fun. Where does the time go? But half of the last over 25 years, I spent as a founder CEO. Again, as I mentioned briefly, I built and sold 2 social platforms. I won't go into details. And then the other half, spent reading and writing and thinking and teaching. So after I sold my first business, I won a business plan competition at UCLA's Anderson School at 24 years old. I hired the CEO of Adidas to replace me at 25 years old. And it was kind of a .com, whatever. I call it my $5 million MBA. I had enough to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I started reading a lot. And I traveled a bit. I studied, Marcus Aurelius in the Danube, where he wrote, near the Danube, where he wrote Meditations, Jesus in Jerusalem, Socrates in Athens, Rumi in Konya, Turkey, Seneca, where he wrote the Letters from a Stoic. It just really immersed myself in that. Then I needed to make money again after a few years, and started my second business, which was before Facebook. MySpace was big. Did that. John Mackey of Whole Foods invested, nearly bought it. Then I had more time. So I just spent a lot of time going back and forth between business and philosophy. And in the process, just obsessed about what ancient wisdom and modern science have to say. I created something called Philosopher's Notes, where I distilled these great books into simple summaries. I thought I would do 100 of them. I'm on like 670 or something, So I've done basically all of the great books on ancient wisdom, modern science into little 20-minute summaries. And then I distilled all that into a 300-day coach program that's been scientifically proven to change people's lives. And then an app that's done the same thing. That's kind of a now long but abridged take. But when I studied all of that, what I found was you can integrate all of these truths into 7 simple objectives. So the first objective that you have to understand is you've been seduced to play the wrong game. And it's not a new challenge. This is a 2,500-year-old challenge. The Socrates and the Stoics talked about the choice of Hercules 2,500 years ago. The choice of Hercules, he was their hero. Of course, he was mythological, but he's a young man. He's not Hercules yet, and he's out contemplating his life on a walk in a forest. 2 goddesses come up to him and approach him at a fork in the road. One of them rushes ahead of the other. And she's kind of overly made up and preening, is how Socrates describes it, right? And you can almost see her getting ready to snap a selfie and put it up on Instagram, right? And she tells Hercules, follow me. My name is Happiness. She lies. Her name is Vice. You won't need to work hard. I'll give you everything you need. Your life's going to be amazing. And then the other goddess waits patiently. She steps forward, and she's got this beautiful, austere, stern beauty to her. And she says, don't listen to anything that she said. It's just not true. Nothing in life is easy. I will not promise you that. You follow me, I'm going to give you hardship after hardship, but you will create a life worthy of your own admiration and worthy of the admiration of the gods. Her name was Areté, the goddess of virtue, the goddess of excellence, of being your best self. Of course, Hercules chose wisely. The point there is it's a 2,500-year-old challenge. The fame, the wealth, the hotness you've been seduced to go after does not lead to happiness. Living with virtue and meaning and purpose for something bigger than yourself does. That's objective one. Objective two, we've been talking about all day, which is forging anti-fragile confidence. Rule number one of a good hero's journey is it's not supposed to be easy. Your story that you shouldn't be having the problems you have is the biggest obstacle to you facing them powerfully and using them to get stronger. So that's objective two, forge anti-fragile confidence. Objective three, to go quickly, you got to simplify self-help. It's easy to get overwhelmed. I break it down into the big three: energy, work, and love. If you can get those three right, you're 90% there. And then we systematically help you get clarity on who you are at your best and what you do, the protocol. Objective four is make today a masterpiece. You can't set New Year's resolutions and then forget about them until next New Year's. You need new days resolutions. So commit every morning to being your best self. Today is the day. Objective five is the art and science of behavioral change, self-mastery 101, basically. I'm a huge student of the science of willpower, behavioral change, James Clear's Atomic Habits, BJ Fogg, etc. There's a science to it, like you need to get really good at installing and deleting habits. We help you do that. Objective six is you got to dominate the fundamentals. Control the controllables was a phrase you used. I'm a big John Wooden guy. You got to know that if you want to see how tall a building is going to be, look at how deeply they're digging the foundation. Most people are lazy and they get bored by the simple things. The great ones don't. Eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, focusing. I gave a talk that I can talk about to SOCOM, the Special Forces Command. 70,000 people, all Navy SEALs, Rangers, etc., report to 4-star General Fenton, who invited me out to do a talk on resiliency that I made anti-fragility. He said in his opening remarks that they train over and over and over and over again until they can't do it wrong. Most people do something until they get it right. The best do it until they can't get it wrong. That discipline on the fundamentals is key. When you do objective 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know the game, you're forging anti-fragile confidence, you're focusing on the big three: energy, work, and love. You make today a masterpiece, you master yourself, and you dominate the fundamentals. You activate your superpower. I call it soul force, which is a Gandhi phrase. It's the Chinese philosophers called it moral charisma. It was the entire point of their work, where you effortlessly show up as your best self and people feel it. Literally, there's a neuroscience to this, that people feel. Individuals, we evolve to know when someone's living in integrity, and you want to follow those people. You want to be with those people. So that's your superpower. That's what's activated when you more and more consistently do all this stuff. Again, you get me fired up, but that's the 7 objectives. That's the book. That's the coach program. That's basically my life,
So cool, man. I didn't know this. So Areté was the goddess of virtue in the Hercules story.
Yeah, dude.
Man, that's badass, man. That's badass.
Yeah, man. It's one of those things. Even we were playfully talking before. How do you pronounce that word? How do you spell it? Like, what is this? It's one of those, dude. For the 600 years between the ancient Greek, longer than that, ancient Greek and Roman Stoics. I mean, this was the dominant philosophy of the ancient world. Areté is the one-word answer the Stoics would give you on how to live a good life. My tattoo, Areté, is in the book my buddy just wrote on Stoicism for Dummies. It's the one-word summation of the entire philosophy. Why it fell out of our cultural vernacular is a question worth pondering. It never should have gone away. So this is why, I'm so committed to it. And the resonance, that I feel with you right now on it, it's like, well, yeah, what else is there? Let's go.
On that note, I kind of have a question, and then I know you got probably more.
Yeah.
And this is more of a personal question, but hopefully some can relate to. But I'm having a hard time in my life trying to decide or establish, because I have this obsession with, if I'm not doing something that what I would say is improving my fighting position, then why am I doing it, right? And what that ends up leading to, for better or worse, is a life where I don't have a lot of leisure, and I always have this kind of drive that, okay, I got to be working. I got to be something that's improving my life, whether, it's fitness related or I'm advancing Born Primitive, the business, whether I'm, it always has to be something productive. Even on an airplane, like I don't think in 10 years running Born Primitive, I've ever not worked the entire flight. The second I get in my seat, I connect to Wi-Fi and I'm hammering emails. It could be the midnight flight and it's a 4-hour flight. I'm the only maniac working furiously the whole time. That's just what we're doing. And I finally, I'm trying to find that balance of, while that helps advance your career and all these other things, and I'm more physically fit because I, adopt that. Like, there has to be maybe a balance somewhere where that, that can't always be the case, but I'm having a hard time allowing myself that grace. So, this first time ever, I was flying back from, SHOT Show, when we were there for Building Born Primitive Tactical, and I was smoked. And I was just cross-eyed doing so many emails, and I finally, Top Gun was on the TV. I was flying back Delta, and they got the screens, and I love the new Top Gun. And I finally was like, you know what? For the first time in 10 years, I'm gonna be like everybody else on this plane. I'm gonna order a Coke Zero, and I'm gonna watch Top Gun for 2 hours with no obligations. And it's such a dumb example. But for me, that was like a significant thing that I'm like, all right, I can kind of unlock, right? Or when I put my daughter to bed at 8:15 and I decide, all right, I got like 2 hours. Do I work or do I go hit the sauna and stretch and like all these productive things? Or do I put Netflix on for 90 minutes and just be a normal human for once? And I usually default to get after it and do something productive. And that's the answer 499 times out of 500. But as I reflect on that as an individual, I'm wondering, is there some flaw in that approach that I'm kind of just a total maniac about everything? And while it's allowed me to produce success in my life, so I'm just curious because you're such a, like, what is your take on that? Should I try to rewire, or should I just embrace it and say, hey, you're type A, this is how you're wired, this is why you're going to succeed. Of course, you got to find balance with your family. I have been able to do that fine because I see that's a non-negotiable. So I don't have issues putting things down for my daughter and spending time with her. That's kind of my one break. But everything else, like, there's no leisure. It's game on. We're working on the weekends. We're getting after it. And as I've gotten older, I've reflected on that because I think I've been that way since probably 7th grade. And it just, it's been a total maniac, and it's like, I'm glad it's produced things, but is it flawed? So I want to know your opinion on it, especially since, you've done all this coaching. I'm sure that's come up in your life, and you've obviously bought and sold businesses. You have to be running at the same pace.
Dude, so again, I love it. And I appreciate your humanity and your humility just to have fun chatting about it. It's interesting because my answer to most questions is yes and yes and yes and yes and yes and yes and yes. There's partial truths to everything, obviously. But I'll tell you what, dude, I actually think that the grace you may need to give yourself the most is to be you, which is, as Arnold Schwarzenegger said in Be Useful, he's a lunatic. You're crazy, dude. You're a maniac. Embrace that. So take the foot off the brakes and allowing yourself to be that guy who is not normal. I forget where it was. Oh, yeah. Sean Casey is another dear friend of mine. So Sean Casey's a former Major League Baseball all-star. He's on Major League Baseball Network. The Yankees hired him to be their hitting coach in the second half of last year, right? So he and I trade aura scores with another buddy of ours, Brandon Geyer, another dear friend. Every morning we're trading aura scores and we're just making each other laugh while we're setting a good pace and all this stuff. He sends me and Brandon a text about not being normal is the point of this story. And my point here is for you to embrace that. Then we'll get into the details of training and recovery. But he's like, yeah, boys, he's got this awesome, funny voice. He's like, all right, little selfie video. Dude, so I don't even know what the context was. We're doing something crazy, we're not normal. He's like, dude, one time I was grinding, and I call Harvey Dorfman. Harvey Dorfman is the Phil Stutz of baseball when he played, right? And he only worked with the best, and he's like, you only call Harvey when you're grinding, it's just tough, right? And he's like, man, this is what I'm feeling, Harvey, or Dorfman, and da-da-da-da, and he tells him all the things he's feeling. And Harvey sits there and he listens to him and goes, Sean, yep, I hear you. And everything you just described is totally normal. I really get it. The next line, and I don't curse, I'm kind of Mr. Rogers in public, so fill in the blanks here. It's like, and you know what? You're not normal. So what are you doing? Get back to work and get your mind right. Pull it together, dude. What are we aspiring for here? So this is this video to me, dude. Just so good. So it's become one of our hashtags, #NotNormal. So embracing the fact that you, since seventh grade, have been blessed with this beautiful grace of ambition to show up and to give everything you've got in this precious life of yours. Now, of course, you've been imbalanced at times, but the way I think of balance is like Osho talked about a tightrope walker. Most people think of balance of, look, I'm sitting here right now and I'm balanced. He says you're never actually statically balanced in life. It's dynamic, a little bit too far this way, a little bit too far that way. But for you to trust yourself and your intensity, then my only thing that I practice, and again, you guys are getting me at full throttle. I feel blessed to be in dialogue with you, and you're bringing out the best in me. And we've got this intensity right now. But I was in bed for 10 hours last night. I went to bed minutes after I put our kids to bed. And I slept for 8 hours and 48 minutes, 89% efficiency or whatever, just under 10 hours. I wake up, and the first thing I do is see how low I can get my resting heart rate, right? And I've got my little pulse oximeter, and I'm meditating. And I'm trying to get as tranquil as I can, knowing I'm going to go all out in contexts like this. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to be all in and then completely off, and then all in and completely off, making these really big, high amplitude waves. And so that'd be my only coaching, if you will, is do you, dude, on your terms. And then you gotta know when you need to train your recovery. And when that Top Gun is absolutely the most productive, in quotes, thing you can do to sustain the intensity you want, then enjoy it and no shame, and then you make the decision dynamically. But I would offer that the number one thing I get is we need more people like you, dude. We get pulled back to the mean of normality. We don't need that, man. We need more grounded, energized, tranquil, calm, confident dudes that are showing what an integrated life looks like. Energy, work, and love. That would be the other thing, of course, is time with our kids and making sure that's where we want it to be, and not making trades we're going to regret. No one we're making trades, but not making trades we're going to regret, in 20 years, et cetera. Again, saying a ton, but that's kind of how I approach that.
Well, and I think another angle or question I would ask, Bear, if I were in your shoes, and of course I think we've all been in that place at a time kind of questioning, like, is this really me, or is this how I should be, is like, does that make you come alive? Because I know when I reflect on, and I've done this through use of plant medicine or psychedelics, because they are a great tool for self-reflecting on constructs you've built of yourself that may not be what I call your true essence, meaning like maybe daddy or mommy or aunt or uncle who thought they knew what was best for you said you need to be this way. And why I asked the question first of like, what makes you come alive is always a good indicator that that's true to your soul. So for you in this instance, like if working like that makes you come alive, then the same way Brian just said, it's like, yeah, that like keep pulling at that thread and ignore the outside world. Where I have self-reflected on things that were maybe a part of my personality is if I feel like it's becoming like an exhaustion to keep doing that way, then that's when I ask the question, like, why am I this way? And if you can get in there and kind of, whether in my case it was through psychedelics or people use meditation, if you trace that back to a root where you're like, damn, I'm doing this to try to prove my dad right, or I'm doing this to try to prove my brother right or my sister right, that's where there may need to be a pivot as to like, that may not be a sustainable thing over time. So it's kind of like Brian said, it could be a yes or a yes depending on the scenario. But if that's what makes you come alive, it's like, and that's kind of it seems like the work of Brian's life as a whole is like, what makes you come alive and what resonates with you on a soul level, keep doing more of that. And if it doesn't, just be willing to ask the hard questions in the way you're doing with people who will give you good feedback as to where you may be miscalibrated a little bit.
Yeah, I think some of it is rooted in I in moments where I know everyone else is doing normal things, I get extra fired up to put in the work. So at 8:00 at night, I know everyone else is chilling, watching Netflix. I'm like, okay, everyone's works the 9 to 5. So like, yeah, I'm here at the office and we do get after it. And the pace we run here, I mean, we're meetings, and it's high energy and you know what I mean? Yeah. But okay, that's the standard. Everyone's like working a 9 to 5. So what are the other times that you can gain ground or close the gap on your competition? So that's how I look at it. So like on an airplane coming back on a Friday night and it's 9:30 p.m., no one else is working in the entire plane. I'm like, this is an opportunity for me to gain ground, right? That's why I had to justify it. Hey, let's shut the laptop for 2 hours. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the fight will still be there in the morning. So that I've always looked at it like that. That's why on Sundays I get fired up and I have to show restraint because like no one's working right now, right? And that was the same way in sports. Like so, it started with sports, right?
Yeah.
When can I become a better athlete when no one else is working? And then to the contrary, if you're not working when you know everyone else is working, it drives you nuts because you feel like you're getting behind in the race.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think it is rooted in sports, and I think I wasn't naturally a good athlete.
Yeah.
So I had to really like do extra time in the weight room and all of that, and I wanted to be a collegiate athlete. So like I always had that chip on my shoulder. If I need to outwork them because I don't naturally run as fast as them, I don't naturally jump as high. You know what I mean? I'm not naturally gifted. I just got to be scrappy, and I got to outwork them.
And if that's the journey, and here I'll be vulnerable for a second. I think we could all relate to this. Like your exact example, I had a dad who was very hard on us, like very, very hard, like almost too hard at times. And what I realized is his voice had kind of set up camp in my psyche in a way that was not healthy long term. Almost relating exactly to what you did is that I was having trouble shutting down on any task because he was always so hard on us to like, and I'm grateful for it now. Like I look back and I wouldn't trade my father for the world, but that's where I say is like, as long as you're engaged and you're in love with the journey you're on when you're like that and you're so voracious and so competitive, let it be. But for like on a personal level, I know there were times I had to go in and say, wait a second, the why behind this isn't for the right reason. Like I'm not even enjoying this. This is because my dad, when we were 7 years old, was so hard on us that like that voice now has gotten a little bit intertwined with my own psyche. And that's where I think some things had to get unpacked a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think,
go.
Brian? What do you think, Brian?
Dude, I think you guys are both great. I think again, there's so much truth and so much wisdom in this, and yeah, and then ultimately the race is with ourselves. You know, it's like, all right, cool. Like this is a you know, it's a sacred opportunity to show up and to be in integrity with our highest selves, and just resonate with what you both are saying. Two more of my heroes come to mind briefly. Ralph Waldo Emerson, after whom we named our son Emerson. You know, when I meditate every morning, I bring my heroes to mind. They're kind of like, you know, Dumbledore's, to use that metaphor again, his headmasters, you know, at Hogwarts, they kind of came to life in their frame. My dudes talk to me. So every morning they talk to me. So Ralph Waldo Emerson tells me every morning, trust thyself, which is from his essay, Self-Reliance. And if you guys haven't read that, I've read that, I don't know how many times. It's genius. For nonconformity, society will whip you with its displeasure. So society wants you to do certain things, which is where the word normal makes me vomit emoji. It's like, well, that's a good sign. I don't want to do that, you know? But then you got to trust yourself, you know? And then Joseph Campbell comes to mind as well, which reflects on something you shared, Tony, which is follow your bliss, is what he said. Now, he wished he emphasized, and, you know, your grunt. You got to work hard. It's not just about what makes you feel good. You want to trust that impulse you have to do something is divine. Like there's something there, and you got to put in the effort. But when you combine those two things with proper recovery training, then, dude, it's how fast can you go and how hard can you go, you know, and it's for you and your pursuit of your goals and closing that gap. You know, it's like Matthew McConaughey says his version of a hero is the version of himself he's chasing, that he could become, you know, and that will become more sophisticated as we get more mature and integrated with the energy, the work, the love, the spirituality. But there's something about that ownership of that vision that I think is really, really powerful.
Yeah. Well, Brian, thank you.
I want to get in the app real quick. I want to, of course, like let you plug it, but I'm also very curious. So for the people that in their lives want to adopt a lot of this, as I understand it, the app allows, it makes it a very digestible way to start enacting these principles. So could you just walk us through how it works a little bit, Brian? And, you know, I think, because I'm definitely going to do it. I mean, this sounds fascinating. And it's so nice that you've read thousands of books and all this super, you know, probably sophisticated and complex thought, but boiled it down to, okay, what are the kind of key takeaways and how do we immediately implement this in our lives to become better versions of ourselves? And I mean, as busy as we all are, that's so needed, right? So walk us through that a little bit, Brian, if you don't mind.
Yeah, dude.
Oh,
I
there we
just
go.
busted
Screen
open
share.
the app. I don't know if you guys can.
Yep, we
Yeah,
got
yeah.
it.
So this is Heroic. And the basic app is architected with the nav bar is theory and then practice and then mastery and then together, right? So the idea is we want to move you from theory to practice to mastery together. Each of those is a component of how we think you change someone's life. I mentioned the philosopher's notes. We have 667 summaries on the best books on mental toughness, on positive psychology, on stoicism that we talked about. So just to go there, like I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday, The Daily Stoic, but all the great books on stoicism I've broken down into these philosopher's notes. Each great book has like big ideas, is what I call them. Those sections you asterisk and underline and mark all up. I pull them out and then I riff on them and connect them to other ideas, etc. Anyway, that's the philosopher's notes that a lot of people like. And then we've got the protocol, the practice in the app, which is what I talked about. The worse you feel, the more committed you are to your protocol. I said it presupposes you know what you do when you're at your best. We help you get clarity on that in the app and then hit it every single day. It's kind of like habit tracking, but virtues based and the real important, essential, high leverage things that you want to do in energy, work, and love. I won't bore you with that, but we help you create an identity and then you do the things you do when you're at your best. Because you got to make your prior best, your new baseline. I mentioned I'm in bed for 9 to 10 hours. Well, I've hit that target, nearly every time since we've had the app, with maybe 10 or 15 exceptions. And then these are the things I do, dude. I cold plunge, I do my burpees, I do my pull-ups, basic things. But I do them every day, especially when I don't feel like doing it. And the app helps you do that. Anyway, that's, there's a lot more to the app, but that's the basic idea of some of what we have in there. And then the coaching program is the thing we're most excited about, helping people go next level who want to help other people go next level. But yeah, go wherever you want to go from there.
And is that through the app then? Like, so if I wanted to get like a life coach, do you help us find that? You connect it. I know they go through your training protocol. Yeah. So how does that work? I mean, actually, that's something I've been thinking about for honestly the last couple of years of like, because I've heard of, it's always like you said earlier, it's the super high performing elite individuals that have coaches, and it seems counterintuitive, but there's a reason, right? It's like they're that's part of why they're elite, because they think like that and they're always looking to improve all aspects of their life. So walk us through the coaching program and how we could get onboarded onto that and get signed up.
Yeah, awesome, dude. So there's two facets to the coaching program. One, becoming trained by us in our protocol. So again, 10,000 people have gone through it from 100 countries. Half of them are coaches who want to coach people. The other half just want to use the protocol to get better. Like Sean Casey, the New York Yankees hitting coach, is one of our coaches. Brandon Guyer, the guy I mentioned, he's the mental toughness coach for the Los Angeles Angels last year. We've got a lot of very elite performers who have gone through our program who coach, but not in the way you may think about it. Or they just want to become kind of better. So you can go through that program, heroic.us/coach is where you can learn more. Or you can use the app and get coached by one of our coaches. So we have one-on-one coaching that we do with our corporate clients and individuals in our community. You can learn more about that at heroic.us/coach as well. We're actually just rolling that out right now and we're fired up. Like our absolute best coaches, we train to walk you through the protocol that I just talked about, the 7 objectives, all of the things we talked about, moving from theory to practice with one of our elite coaches, etc.
And Brian, do you coach?
I do informally some of the most elite people that I've mentioned, but I decided a long time ago that I never wanted to get paid directly to coach. I wanted to train coaches, and I feel blessed to work with some pretty extraordinary people, but that's not really my personal thing to kind of do the one-on-one.
Okay. Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you think you could help a guy like me get connected to one of your best coaches? I think I could use a little coaching in my life.
Let's text buddy up, dude. Okay. So after we hit pause or whatever, let's text it up.
I think this is my sign, honestly, because like like this was awesome, and like I subscribe to all of this. So if that's a real offer, I'll take you up on that, because I'd love to immerse myself in this.
Dude.
Okay.
I would be honored, and I appreciate you asking, and absolutely.
Well, Brian, I think you're going to be the first. We're 30 episodes in, and you're going to be the first guest that I'm going to say we need to do a follow up.
Yeah,
because I know personally, I could keep going and pulling at threads that I would love to hear your opinion on. So, I mean, just regardless, like appreciate everything you're putting out there. Appreciate your time today, and then as I kicked off with, just your intentionality and intensity with all you do, I think is something we need more of in this world. So. Thank you for being you and kind of speaking your truth unapologetically and standing firm in what you believe is best for individuals and communities as a whole. And appreciate you just spending some time here with us today.
Absolutely.
Dude, I gotta celebrate you one more time, man. We're so just goosebumps aligned. So check it out, man. In our app, we help you get clarity on your identity, right? Which means repeated beingness, who you're committed to being. You got to know who that is. You're never going to outperform a poor self-image. So you got to have a high image of yourself and you got to recommit. Then you commit to virtues, right? So my virtues, you mentioned unapologetically. Every morning you commit to being a certain, set of virtues, right? So I'm fiercely ambitious. I'm focused on what's important now. I'm anti-fragile and I'm unapologetically intense. That's literally like, all right, like it or love it, here we go. So it's a commitment I made and just your reflection of that back. I just want to celebrate and appreciate. But dude, I'm back. You guys just tell me when you want to have me if you do, and can't wait to continue the chat. I've been blessed to have some great chats. I had a similar great chat with Jim Rohn. This is right there, dude, and dudes as just one of my all-time favorites. So I appreciate you, Tony. I appreciate you, Bear, and where we went.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the listeners and viewers, check out the book. It's called Areté, Activate Your Heroic Potential. Check out the app. I mean, hopefully you guys got a lot out of this. I know. I'm losing, now I can't talk. I know I did. And looking forward to continuing the relationship, Brian. And we'd love to get you on for a sequel once we can hopefully digest some of this stuff and put it into practice. And just thank you so much for your time.
Day one, guys. Let's go. Appreciate you both. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
See ya.